Hi everyone. I'm Cecilia or Cece. Nice to meet all of you if I didn't meet you guys yesterday. We're excited to have the second meeting today. We'll be finishing up some of the stuff we didn't get to yesterday, and then we're going to be starting on writing your supplementals and writing your Common App essay.
Yay. Okay, so we'll head straight into it.
Okay, so basically, we're gonna just talk to you guys a little bit about the different types of applications. And there's actually more than you might originally think. So this is very important, so pay close attention to this. So there are initially three different rounds and kind of five different types. So the first round is early round one, and this consists of ED, EA, and REA. And we'll explain what all of those different terms mean and what they mean compared to each other very soon. And then the second round is, let's say you didn't get into your, let's say you applied ED and you didn't get in, then you can apply ED2, and that would be a little bit later. And then the third round is just regular application, regular decision, and that's where you're going to be applying to most of your schools. But we'll talk about what all these mean in just a second.
Perfect. Just like Cece mentioned, we have those three rounds, and the first one we're going to talk about in the early round is early decision. And the most important thing that you understand about early decision is that it is binding. And what that means is that if you apply to school early decision and you get in, you have to go to that institution and you have to withdraw any other applications you made to other schools that you might have applied to. And for early decision, the typical deadline is going to be November 1st. It might vary from year to year and it might vary from school to school, but typically it's going to be November 1st. And the schools will typically let you know in mid-December. Um, so because early decision is binding, it's really for your top choice, the school that you would go to over any other school. And it's important that, you understand that when you're making that decision to apply early decision. And, one of the benefits of applying ED is that it shows to the school that this is your top choice, that you are highly interested. And if you were to get in, you will go no matter what. And some say it can boost your chances slightly if you're a competitive applicant because it is a smaller applicant pool, which just means that there are less people applying, because it is an early round. But some people also say it might be more competitive because while the applicant pool might be smaller, it might actually be more competitive applicants, because it's the people who are aiming the highest and whose top schools are really their top choice. And a lot of different colleges offer early decision, and they'll make it very clear on their website. So if there are schools you're considering applying early decision or any of the other ways you can apply that we're going to get into, you can just check the website. You can Google, and it'll be right there, very easy to check.
So, an important thing to know is early decision and early action are not the same thing. They're very, very different. One of kind of like the only thing that's the same is you would be submitting them during the same time period. So, in that early, like first week of November, or for some schools, late October period. Um, Early action is not binding. So, you can apply to as many early action schools as you'd like. You could end up applying to only one early decision school and not doing any EA schools, and that would be fine. Or you could apply to an early decision school and also EA to every other school on your list as long as the school has an option of early action. Some schools don't offer early action applications. Um, the deadline, like I said, is usually the same time as ED, and you'll get a decision notification usually sometime in January. So that's a little bit different than early decision. It's a little bit later. Um, and so if you do get into your early decision school, you would have to withdraw your applications from the schools that you had previously EA'd to. Um, and this this type of application is good for students that want results early, want to have a little bit of relief early on in the application cycle, but also flexibility and don't want to be bound to a specific school just yet. And like I said, you can EA even if you did ED to a school, and this is, a good opportunity in case you don't get into your ED school and you still kind of like want a backup plan. I ended up EAing to a few of my safeties just so like I felt secure when like earlier in the process. And this again might increase your chances slightly, um, but not as much as early decision because it's not binding. So yeah.
And the last type of early application is the restrictive early action. And there's not a lot of schools that do REA, the most prominent being Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Georgetown, and Stanford. There might be a couple of more. But in some ways, REA is similar to early action, and in other ways, it's similar to ED. But the most important thing is that REA is not binding. So if you apply to a school early, a restrictive early action, and you get in, you're not obligated to go. And like the other early action schools, the deadline's typically going to be November 1st. And like early decision, you'll be usually notified during mid-December. And it's best for students who have a top choice school, but who also want to have some flexibility for regular decision and for other schools. I knew that I personally was not somebody who wanted to commit 100% to a school during the application process. So I knew restrictive early action was something that I would be interested in. Um, there are some restrictions. You can't apply to a school ED or EA to other private schools. But if you are doing REA, you can apply EA to public universities or colleges. And I know it can sound a little confusing, which is why we're going in depth through all of these. Um, and like early decision, it shows strong interest to the school because you're not applying to other schools to apply to a school REA. And it's competitive similar to ED because you're a smaller applicant pool, so it is boosting your chances. But it's other competitive applicants as well. And like I mentioned, schools like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Georgetown, and Stanford do REA.
Yeah, I'll add to that really quickly. So this is something kind of unique, but some of you might be going through it. For me, I was going through the recruitment process being an athlete while also, applying to schools on my own time. So it was really important. I didn't want to be bound to a school in case I, received an athletic offer that I liked more. So for me, I ended up REAing to a specific school and then doing a few regular decision applications. And I'm so glad I did that because once I got into Harvard regular decision, the coach offered me a spot on the team. And so that's, a switch up that I did last second. But it was because I did restrictive early action and was able to not be bound to a school before, I had all my options there.
Yeah, so that's why it's important that, we're strongly considering what exactly it is that we're doing when we're applying to schools early, because, there are a lot of restrictions, especially if you're doing early decision, because you don't want to be in a situation where you're already committed to a school and you get a better offer and you can't take it because you've already committed to a certain school by applying early decision.
Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about ED2. And this is kind of a unique option. Most people don't do it, but a lot of people do end up doing it. So let's just talk a little bit about what it means and how it's different from ED1. So early decision one, the application is due usually November 1st. Sometimes it'll be a little different depending on the school. But let's say you don't get into your ED1 school. Um, then you have the option to submit an ED2 application. And very few schools have ED2 as an option, but there are some schools that do. For example, BU, Boston University, Bowdoin, NYU, Tufts, etc. I know U Chicago also has the ED2 option. So there are a few schools that you know, are amazing, like top 20, top 30 schools that do have this option, but it's unique in the sense that a lot of schools don't. And the deadline here is typically early January. So this is actually very similar to when your regular decision applications will be due. It might be a little bit sooner. And you get the notification before you get your regular decision results as well. It'll be around mid-February. And the same restrictions apply to this as ED1. You can only ED2 to one school. And again, if you get in, you're bound. You have to go. Yep.
Okay, and the last application type is the regular decision, and this is going to be the last round, and it's the most generic one. So it's not going to be binding. Um, you can decide to go to any schools that you get into regular decision. And the typical deadline is going to be January 1st, with some schools extending up until January 15th. Um, and you're going to be let know about your decision, usually in late March and sometimes in early April. And the great thing about regular decision is that there are no restrictions. You can apply to as many schools as you'd like. Um, but the impact of this is that it's the largest applicant pool, so it's going to be more competitive, especially at top schools, because you're competing against the most people. And this is where the bulk of your applications is going to be in, um, if you didn't get into a school early, or if you did EA or REA, you got into a school, but you want more options.
Okay, now we're going to talk about a school example. I think a lot of you are familiar with this school here, but we're just going to do a little bit of an overview, right, about how the college process pertains to you all and your school, the specific school, BSGE. So, as some of you may know, BSGE is a highly selective NYC public school offering a rigorous academic curriculum through a 6-year integrated pre-IB and IB diploma program. And we talked a little bit about what IB tests mean, what they mean for your college application yesterday, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in specifics today. And basically, here are some stats that are out online. You can go and Google and fact check us right now if you would like. But the US News and World Report from 2 years ago said that BSGE was ranked number 106 high school in the US, which is a crazy ranking, and number 10 NYC public high school. So that's in the 10 best NYC public high schools. So that's amazing. Um, and then Niche said that it's number 30 of over 1,000 best public high schools in New York. And there are many other ones. Something I want to highlight here is that Niche also says, ranks it number 11 of over 1,000 best college prep public high schools in New York. So you guys are in good shape, and we're here today and here the next few days to make sure you're in the best shape possible going into this process.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to add, I know we were talking yesterday about how rigorous your school is, and that might be stressful now, especially when you're studying for exams and it's the end of the year. But the great thing of going to a rigorous high school is that it is truly the best college prep. You're going to get to college and you might not struggle as much as your other peers who might be acclimating to having a rigorous course load. But you guys are going through that right now, so. Oh, you'll be very prepared for college. Um, so this is something that you guys are probably aware of, but we know we want to think about in the context of college applications. So just as a quick overview, BSGE does not rank students because of the small class size, but also it doesn't do a cumulative GPA. Um, Instead, student performance is evaluated using the IB 1 to 7 scale, and grade descriptors are used on the transcripts. So, yesterday, when we were talking about the common application and all these things that you're going to have to submit, you're going to note these things about your school when you're submitting the college common application. But also, every university that you apply to is going to get from your guidance counselor a school profile, and it describes the school and it explains all of this. So the specific situation from your high school, um, it isn't going to be, you know, at put you at a disadvantage or an advantage because they're comparing you in the context of the high school that you went to. And so it's not going to place you at an advantage or disadvantage.
And I want to say, Milena, thank you so much for adding this in. Every high school has this. So often the students are like, but how do they know that I go to specialized? How do they know that I go to baccalaureate? They all know, they get a profile of the school. So thank you so much for adding an amazing example of what a profile looks like. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, so the universities you're applying to, they're going to be aware, they get this information from your school directly.
Okay, so this is the highlights from the graduating class 2 years ago. So there were the total graduates were at 95, which again is, a comment to the small class size. And one of the reasons your school doesn't do like rankings, Bronx Science doesn't do that either, even though we have, around 800 people per class. Um, the college matriculation rate is 100%, which is incredible and a really honestly rare number in NYC public high schools. And 97 about 97% of students decided to attend a four-year college from this class, and 88% got the full IB diploma. Um, they were 88% were candidates for this full IB diploma, and around 81% did earn the diploma out of this class. And this is, when I saw this number, I was actually shocked, and I didn't even know how this stat could be recorded, but there was $33 million of merit-based scholarship offered to 90 spread out over 95 different kids. That's an insane amount of money. And I would like to point out this is merit-based as well. So many colleges now do fully need-based. All of the Ivies are fully need-based. So this is solely from schools that offer merit-based scholarships, which is incredible.
Oh, Cece, I'm so glad that you're doing this. I'm so happy. Look, every single college has this. You see that? So we always know now every single college will have this information. Amazing. And the school that you go to is very supportive. And remember, your Cecilia's leading the webinar, goes to Bronx Science, a top performer at Bronx Science, got into Harvard, and Cecilia's wowed. And Milena, aren't you wowed by looking at this? The college admissions will also be wowed when they see your backgrounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is all information that the colleges you're applying to are going to get. So you guys go check a competitive school, and this is going to leave a good impression. So you guys have to work hard to keep this up. Um, In terms of the academic structure, I'm sure a lot of you guys are aware, but just to go over from grades 7 to 10, you guys do the pre-IB program, and it emphasizes critical thinking, interdisciplinary learning, and community involvement, which are all things that colleges are looking for in their applicants, as well as the 100 hours of community and service. These are all things that look great on colleges' applications, but also prepare you for whichever institution you will end up at. Um, the second part, grades 11 through 12, is the IB diploma program. And I'm sure you guys are aware, but just to go over the assessment in 6 subject areas: English, second modern language, individuals and societies, experimental science, mathematics, and visual arts or technology. So again, colleges are looking for well-rounded students. So it's absolutely amazing that you guys already go into all these different disciplines throughout high school. Um, and also the additional IB requirements, the theory of knowledge, and the extended essay about a research project. A lot of college applications will have a spot where you can talk about potential research that you've done, or this is something that you can talk about in your personal statement or in your supplemental essays that we're going to go over tomorrow. So it's great, great, great that you guys have this experience. And um, not only is it making you a well-rounded student, but it's going to look great on your applications, as well again as the 100 plus hours of creativity, activity, and service.
Um, I'll comment on the extra research. A few schools, not all of them, but there are a few, especially some that have separate applications to the Common App. Um, allow you to put like an abstract of research or put like the first page of your research, your independent research that you've been working on. So for me, our school also has a research program, and I was able to do research outside of school, kind of in tandem with that program. And the school that I REA'd to had that option. Yale had that option of putting, the first page of your research paper. So that was a great bonus because I already had it done and written because of the school program that I was in, and it makes my application more competitive compared to other people that might not have that. Okay, let's talk about the personal statement. Now we are on to, the writing. And a lot of you had some questions about this yesterday, and we'll get to go in depth about it today. Even give you guys some examples of what, good and not so good writing might look like on your Common App personal statement. So, just a general debrief. A personal statement is your opportunity to say what's important to you. This is your chance to not just answer to a prompt, but to really think about what's important to me, who am I, what do I want the admissions officers to see in my words. A lot of the college application process are numbers. A lot of the application is, words from other people, are your rec letters, your raves, stuff like that. But this is an amazing opportunity for you to do something that is just about you and you to put it in your own words and tell it like it is. So, this is a great way for the admissions officers also to see who you are. Um, and then the second thing is supplements are the place to show why you like the school and why it's right for you. So supplements are a little different in the way that you are actually responding to specific questions, usually about the school. So those require kind of, different research and different um, things that go into it, but we'll talk about that later.
And something I just want to add is that the personal statement, the Common App essay, it's all the same thing, but this is the essay that's going to be sent to most, if not all, of the schools that you are applying to. So if there is one story that you want all of the colleges you're applying to know, one lesson that you've learned, or something about you that you just want all of the schools to know, the personal statement is where you should put it. It's going to be, the most important part or the written part of your application. And these are the 7 prompts that Common App gives you to answer in your personal statement. And I encourage you to take a moment to read them, maybe tonight or whenever you have the time to, hopefully soon. So you can start thinking about, maybe brainstorming some ideas for things that you can write about. But some things I want to point out is a lot of these prompts are very vague or open-ended. And the last one is share an essay of any topic of your choice. So essentially, the way I like to view the personal statement is essentially, and I tell this to the kids that I work with, is I like to view it as unprompted. It's a space for you to talk about your life and what you've learned and what you would contribute on a college campus and use it in any way that you would like that you think is beneficial to your college application. So I like to think of the prompts as maybe a starting point or a way for you to start thinking about what you want to write about or maybe to guide you. But don't limit yourself to these 7 prompts right here. I like to tell, the kids I work with that to view it as unprompted.
And also, the seventh prompt literally is write an essay about anything. So, and honestly, most people do that. That's what I did, and it worked out for me. So you can do that. Okay, let's get into how do you do this? You know, we're talking all this about how important this essay is, but what are you supposed to write? You're supposed to like showcase your entire heart and soul in this one essay. How do you know how to do that and what to write? This was really hard for me at first too. There was nothing that kind of seemed obvious for me. For some people, it might be obvious. It might be like, oh, this is the monumental time in my life, a thing that really changed me. You might know that right now and know that you want to do that, right? But some people don't. Um, Sorry, don't mind my dog trying to get into my room. Um, so the first thing is read those questions and see what resonates with you and make a list of possible topics. Um, so what I did at the beginning was I saw the different questions that there were, and I put different topics under each question that I think would be good at writing. So, you know, for one, there's a challenge. I put three topics, potential topics that I could write about that went along with that question. That's a great place to start and not get overwhelmed with what am I going to do? Well, try to respond to a question and see if anything, you know, starts flowing from that. The big thing the big number two thing is avoid cliches. This is really important because there are a lot of people that write essays about the same thing. You do not want to be one of those people. Um, the admission officers are reading hundreds, maybe tens, maybe hundreds of applications a day, and you want to be able to stand out because sometimes if they don't like your essay or don't like the topic in the first paragraph, they won't continue reading, and you don't want that to be the case. The third thing is reflect on significant life experiences. This is your time to reflect. And sometimes you might be like, I'll try to write about this topic, but I might not be ready to really go into it. And that's okay to understand. And it takes a level of maturity to realize, hey, I don't know if it's the right time for me to talk about this. And that's okay. Um, Consider challenges, achievements, and passions. One of my friends wrote about dandelions and her gardening experience, and you might say, oh, that sounds boring, but it was such a beautiful essay because you could tell from this first sentence that she was incredibly passionate about it and loved doing it. So, really, you can make any topic good if you really love it. Think about what makes you unique, right? If you have a really unique experience, if you've saved a life, you were a lifeguard and you saved a life, that's a really unique experience, and they would love to hear about that. And lastly, pick one of your topics that you had originally wrote during that listing and just start writing. See how it feels. If you don't like it, put it down for a second. Don't force yourself to write. Um, and, you know, just see where the wind takes you with your topics list that you've created.
Yeah, and just one thing I want to add is sometimes when, I'm working with kids and they have no idea where to start because, it can be daunting. Um, what I like to do is, I always go back to think about it from the admissions officer's perspective. And I tell them, what is one adjective that you want them to use to describe you after they have read your personal statement? And that might vary from person to person depending on the kind of person that you are and that you want to be perceived as. So for some people that might be determined. And if that's the adjective that you want them to use to describe you, then I ask you, what is a story or an experience that you've had that shows how you as a person are determined? And for some people, it might be compassionate or passionate about things, and it just depends about who you are and what you value. But that's a little like sort of brain activity that I like to use to get you started and thinking about um, for the personal statement. And like Cece mentioned earlier, there's a lot of cliches and other easy pitfalls in the personal statement. So here are some things that you should avoid. The first, a love story. The personal statement needs to be about you. It needs to convey to the admissions officers what kind of person you are, what you would contribute on your college campus. Typically, a love story isn't going to be um, able to convey all of those things. So it's something that we want to avoid. Like Cece mentioned, there's a lot of stories that are extremely overdone, especially in the college admissions writing circles. Sports injuries are definitely one of those topics.
Don't do it. Don't do
Yeah.
it.
Also, political arguments, you want to, in your application, appeal to as many people as you can. So don't choose a topic that might unintentionally polarize other people. Trauma dump. I know, especially online, for some reason, the college admissions essay is viewed as, a place where you should trauma dump. But unless your story ultimately shows how um, you as a person would contribute to a college campus in some sort of way, don't trauma dump because it's not going, you're not going to get in because of pity points. Another topic that is especially overdone is the pandemic, especially if it's vague. If you have a unique story that you can frame in a certain way that speaks highly of you, then maybe that's something you could explore potentially writing about in your personal statement. But for the most part, a vague essay about how the pandemic was hard for you isn't going to be a competitive essay. And lastly, a resume barf. The schools you're applying to are already getting your resume if you upload it, or they're getting the content on it in some sort of way, whether it's your extracurriculars that you're listing or if it's the awards you've won. You don't want to be redundant in any part of your application because you get such a limited amount of space to talk about yourself. The personal statement is not somewhere that you want to be repeating these, um, especially when it's the most important essay that you're going to be submitting.
Okay, let's talk about your hook. This is something that you all may talk about in English a lot since you were in elementary school, but really the beginning of your personal statement is the most important because it's going to tell the admissions officers whether or not they want to keep reading. So this is very important. The first thing is make the first sentence interesting. Don't start with, I woke up in the morning and I did this, or you know, at the beginning of my day. Start with something unique. Start in the middle of your day, or start with a question, or start with something that makes the reader say, "Ooh, I want to know what they're talking about. What does that mean?" Make the reader want to keep going. And you, like I just said, you want the reader to want to read more. Also, make the background info not too long. Something really important about your personal statement is that you're talking about things that happened recently. Um, this is something I struggled with, and my English teacher really, pushed on me, is that this statement is telling the admissions officers who you are right now in this moment. So you don't want to have your background info. When I was 5 years old, I wore my first pair of Crocs. You don't want to have half of your essay be about what you discovered about yourself when you were 5 years old. You can have that background info in a paragraph or two, but you don't want it to be over half of your essay because you want to get to the point what this means for you right now in the moment that you're in the present. And also just avoid general statements. Like I said, you don't want to start with, I woke up and I did this. You also don't want to start with, I like books. That is not a good hook that I'm sure a lot of other people applying to whatever school you're applying to also likes books. So avoid those general statements.
Yeah, so like Cece mentioned, you think about it from the admissions officer's perspective. Again, they are reading thousands upon thousands of personal statements throughout the application cycle, maybe even tens or hundreds in a single day. So I know personally when it happens to me when I'm reading a bunch of text, sometimes you start to skim. Parts that are boring, they're not engaging. Maybe you start thinking about something else. And that is absolutely what you don't want to happen when the admissions officers are reading your essays. And one of the best ways to avoid that is by having an engaging hook. And so now we're going to go through some examples. So, an example of ever since I was a child, I've always loved learning. So, this is not going to be a strong or competitive or engaging hook because it's too generic. Too many people can write this particular sentence and probably are writing a sentence like this, especially if they're applying to, to a university that, you think I loved learning, that's what they want to hear, but that's what every other person is writing. You don't want to be too philosophical. You don't want to start your essay with what is the meaning of life? That's what I asked myself when I stood in line for lunch. Like, oh, like I'm confused, you know? Um, so it is a difficult task. You want to approach it, you want to be engaging, but you don't want it to sound not genuine. You don't want to, again, list achievements. You don't want to resume barf, because they are going to be seeing those achievements in, the academic section. When you list your awards, when you talk about the debate tournaments that you've won and your GPA, they're going to know that. So you don't want to waste time because the personal statement is such a precious amount of space, um, that you don't want to be redundant. Um, Also, a way that we might want to avoid is the dictionary definition. Many, many, many essays start like this. So you don't want to be generic, and you want to stand out from the very first word. So these are general things to avoid. But I want to say, take this with a grain of salt, because I think for every one of these, out of 1,000 essays, maybe there might be one that is truly astounding and a beautiful essay, and the essay that gets a kid into every top college. Um, so if you have an idea and you feel very strongly about it, maybe write out a draft. Don't immediately throw it out. Um, but, you know, try to avoid these generic trends. Um, but take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's 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 kind of annoying that we're talking about the hook because it's, the first sentence, like we have to worry about this essay sentence by sentence. The hook's important because it's important to start off strong. It's not just about the first sentence, it's about like the beginning, how you begin. Um, so of course don't hyperfixate on that first sentence literally. That definitely won't help. My advice would be when you're writing your first, draft, don't spend this much time on your first sentence. Just write. Once you're done writing, leave it be, come back to it later. You know what I mean? So this is all very hypothetical. All four of those sentences in the previous slide could potentially lead to incredible essays, but the odds are those are just generic trends on what to avoid generally. If you're an amazing writer, I'm sure any of you could turn those sentences into a great essay, but that's not really, the overall point we're trying to make here. And it's the same for this. Here are some examples of quote unquote good hooks. Feel free to disagree. You don't know what comes next. So these hooks again could be a great start, but then your essay could be bad. So take it with a grain of salt again, just like Milena said. One good option, good way to start your essay is to be hyper specific. Being specific is always better than being generic, and this goes for your entire essay. So here's an example. When I saw the fluorescent white and black keys shining against the aged wood, I knew I needed to learn to play piano. And of course, you're like, piano, like that's a generic topic. Sure, but this sentence is very specific and it's setting up a story and it's showing that this person really wants to play piano even when they saw a piano. That's an interesting and personal, sentence. The next thing is a random beginning. I talked about this a little bit a few slides ago, but you don't want to start in the morning. I woke up and I did this. Start in the middle of your day. Start in the middle of a night. Start in the middle of a thought, of a dream. That makes it interesting and makes the reader say, hey, how did we get here? I want to know. So here's an example of that. The best lesson I've learned came from a trash can. Every morning I helped my grandmother take out the garbage, and every day I saw how simple acts of kindness ripple through a community. And you might be saying, hey, Cece, but it's the second sentence says every morning. What the heck? That's what you said not to do. But that's not the beginning. The beginning we start from the best lesson I've learned is from a trash can. That's in the middle of a very awkward place, an awkward idea. What does a trash can mean? We don't really know what that means. And then you are starting to learn by the second sentence, but you still want to read more. The next thing is an interesting question. I would say don't pose a philosophical question like we talked about in the previous slide, but an interesting question. I used the lifeguard, example before, but imagine your essay starts with, "Have you ever saved a life?" That's a really cool way to start. I'm not saying any of you have to, have a crazy story about how you did CPR on someone and saved their lives, but this makes the reader say, "No, have you?" and want to read more. And lastly, an immediate action. Sometimes a really cool way to start an essay is just to go into it, get into what's happening because you're kind of throwing your reader in there. And an example of that is my legs could barely carry me as I forced my way to the principal's office. So that's in the middle of a day, like I said again, in the middle of something we don't really know what's going on. It's saying like, you're going to the principal's office, so could that be a bad thing? Is that a good thing? What's going on? And it kind of is prompting the admissions officer to want to read more.
Yeah, so basically, just to summarize everything that Cece said, it's like a good hook is basically what Cece just said. It prompts the admissions officer to read more, and that's truly what we want to be going for in a good hook. Um, okay, so to develop your essay, these are principles, ideas, concepts that you should be keeping in mind throughout the drafting and editing process. And one of the ones that I think is the most important, and I truly emphasize with the students that I work with, is to be genuine, be authentic, and show who you really are. You're going to have many different people, commenting, reading, giving you feedback on your essays, and you might have people, who give suggestions, and they might think, oh, you should take it a different way. But ultimately, this is your essay, and you don't want to have somebody else writing it. And literally, you don't want to have somebody literally write it for you because that's going to translate when people are reading it, especially the admissions officers who read many, many, many essays. When something is not genuine, it stands out in a bad way. We want to stand out in a great way, you know? So be authentic. Talk about what you want to talk about, what you're passionate about, the things that you care about, um, and let that show in your writing. Focus on one story or idea because we can, put a lot of emphasis on this essay. You might have a lot of different ideas or stories that you want to tell that are important, and that's great. You should write different drafts, one for each different idea that you have, and then end up picking the one that is the strongest or that you love the most. And then what's great about that is that you may have two or three other drafts of a personal statement. That's content that you can use to inspire you or use for your supplemental essays, which we're going to talk about tomorrow. So you should stay tuned for that. But in the personal statement, you don't want to have it be a word salad of a bunch of different concepts. You want it to be one story that you're telling about yourself that conveys to the admissions officers why they should accept you, why you're an outstanding person, and what you would contribute if you were to be admitted to that university. Number three, like I mentioned earlier, don't let the prompt limit you. This is truly the only space where you can talk about, well, as well as the supplemental essays, but you can truly talk about anything that is important to you that you want to tell the admissions officers. But also, it's the only piece of writing that's going to every school that you're applying to. So if you have a story, but you're kind of scared that it doesn't fit any of the prompts, don't let the prompts limit you. And also, like Cece mentioned, the last prompt is literally to share any story that you think is important. So even if you don't think that it fits into the prompts, it does because it fits under 7. Show, don't tell. This is a concept we maybe learned about in elementary or middle school, and it's a concept that's going to be important throughout your college admissions writing. A lot of the good hooks that Cece mentioned, they were descriptive, and it's something that you'll see, especially if you read a lot of examples, which we highly, highly recommend. Look what people have written out there. We'll talk about this a bit later, but the New York Times, they publish a lot of successful college admissions essays from every application cycle. So it's important that you see what other people are doing, see, um, what has been successful in the past, because especially for the personal statement is a very specific type of writing that you don't really see in other contexts. So it's important that you familiarize yourself with what it is, that a personal statement is. But one thing that you'll notice if you do that research is that a lot of um, personal statements use a lot of descriptive language. And that's because you want to keep the reader engaged throughout the whole, not just the hook. It's particularly important that the hook is engaging, but you want to keep them engaged throughout the whole um, essay. Because, like Cece mentioned, you could have a phenomenal hook and have everyone engaged from that first sentence. But then, if the rest of your essay isn't strong, then it won't be a competitive essay. You want to be specific, not generic. Like I mentioned, use a lot of descriptors, or even in your story yourself, you want to highlight aspects of yourself that are unique and um, isn't true, or maybe other people can't talk about. Because the point of it is to stand out, to tell these universities why you're not like your peers or the people that you're competing against, and why you specifically should be accepted at that university. And this is very similar to the first point, but write in your own voice. A lot of the times, I'll see a draft of an essay, and you can tell that the person writing that essay used thesaurus to replace a lot of the words they might typically use with some synonyms that sound really fancy or complicated, but you can instantly tell when you're reading that that's not genuinely how they speak or how they think about a certain topic. So it's important that you use your own voice. Of course, you don't want to be overly casual. This is still an important piece of writing, unless you have a really cool idea about how not to be casual. But for the most part, you want, be professional, but still write in your own voice. Um, like we just spent 2 whole slides talking about, please, please, please have a strong hook. I think it's arguably the most important part of the essay. But like Cece mentioned, don't let that stop you from starting your draft. You can write about your topic, get a whole draft out, and then focus about specifically how you want to start your hook or your first paragraph. You want to be honest, but be tactful. Please always keep in mind that your ultimate audience is an admissions officer, um, not a peer or a best friend. So you want to keep that in mind when you're writing. Stay positive. Again, I always tell people think about it from the perspective of the admissions officer who is going to be reading your essay. By the end of it, you want them to think positively of you. You don't want it to be a depressing essay. You want them to want to have you on their campus, that you want them to want to meet you. So, be positive, or at least have a tone that is uplifting, because that is the tone that you want to have the readers, the admissions officers take away from your essay. And lastly, make every word count. The personal statement is 650 words. And, right now, sitting there, it might sound daunting, it might sound like a lot of words, but at the end of the day, it's not. The most common issue I see with students who are applying is that they're over the word count. So, with each sentence that you're submitting, you want to make sure it's intentional. There's a reason you're including it, and that ultimately it goes to your main theme or idea or concept that you want the admissions officers to take away about you.
Okay, so this might be far in the future for you all because I did not finish my college essay until like August, the summer before my senior year. So worry about this when you get there. Don't worry about editing yet. When you are completely done with your first draft and you're like, okay, I think I like that. I think I have a full first draft and I'm ready to go back and edit now. Um, the first thing you want to do is take a break, like I said. Make sure you're not editing this draft that you've made the same day. maybe not even the same for a few days. I wrote my first draft and stepped away for like a month because I didn't want to, it was emotional writing and I didn't want to go back yet. I just wanted to see how it sat there for a little bit, see if I was happy with just even like the topic that I was writing about. Next, once you're ready, read it out loud. This is so important. I would say read it out loud slowly and read it out loud several times for every single draft you do, because this is a great way to catch, awkward phrasing and also to tell yourself, does this sound like I'm actually speaking? Like, because you want it to sound like it's in your personal voice. And a great way to see that is actually reading it out loud. And a good thing to do as well is read it out loud to maybe your parents or your best friend or your sibling, someone you really trust, and ask them, does this sound like me? Next is get feedback from other people. Share your essay with trusted people. Do not share your essay to everyone on the planet. Do not share it to your entire English class. Do not share it to every single teacher that has ever taught you. Be selective about who you're sharing it with because you want people you trust. You want people who you'll be okay with taking feedback. A big thing about sharing your essay is you want to get multiple eyes on it because you want different perspectives to see how people interact with it. And you want to be able to personally accept feedback that they're giving you. So if you feel like you would be uncomfortable receiving feedback from a teacher, don't get it from that teacher. Don't show that teacher your essay. The next thing would be that a piece of advice I would give is there's a lot of pressure to, share it to specific people. All my friends told me you have to share it to at least one of your friends. You have to share it to your English teacher. I would recommend, if you're comfortable with it, sharing it to a few people. But for me, I only shared my essay with my mom and my guidance counselor. Some people might not recommend that. You might want to share it to a few other people so they could get their eyes on it as well. But I knew that this was a very personal thing for me, and I was okay with writing it and submitting it to colleges, but I really didn't want a lot of eyes on it. And the advice that my mom and counselor ended up giving me about it was very sufficient for me and very helpful. I didn't feel like I needed another person to read it. So don't feel pressure to send this essay to, everyone around you.
I just want to add that this is amazing advice. And I just want to remind all of you from a legal standpoint, this is your work product. The universe does not need to see your successful Harvard acceptance essay. Please do not be quick to share your essay, email your essay. This is incredible advice. Thank you so much for sharing this.
Yeah, of course. The next thing is look for clarity. Um, a big part of writing this essay is understanding, does this speak to me? Does this speak to who I am? Is this actually what I want people to, know about me? And something that's very important to me. So if you're reading your draft and you're like, actually, I don't know if this is the most important thing to me right now. Or if you're like, I really like this topic, but I'm not saying the things that I want to put through, that's okay. And that's a very important part of drafting. And, having one of the two things being like, okay, I like the way I'm writing, but I don't like my topic. That's great. Write about a different topic in the same, tone, the same voice that you wrote for the first one. Or if you're like, I really like this topic, but I'm seeing I don't like this draft. That's great. Stick with the topic and start a completely new draft. That's totally okay. And also, is there any part of the essay that doesn't just, not resonate with you, but is there any part that leaves the reader confused? You don't want to confuse anyone, you know what I mean? You want there to be a point, and that's a big part of, getting other people to read it. If somebody's reading it and they're like, I don't understand what this sentence means, that's a great piece of advice, and make sure, you tune those things, you fine tune them. Um, the next thing is, of course, stay within the word limit. On Common App, if you put an essay that's over 650 words, it will cut off the end. So make sure it is within the word limit. And I'll also point out that words include numbers, words include dates, and each date, if you put like a dash, it's 3 words because each dash like separates them as words. And there are little, caveats with that as well. Another thing I will say, and this is an important Common App thing, when you copy and paste your essay. Don't write your essay in Common App, write it on a Google Doc. But when you're fully done with your essay and you copy it and paste it onto Common App, it's gonna, I don't know why, but the software automatically bolds every single word in your essay. Make sure you fix that and make sure you unbold it in the Common App application because you do not want the reader to be, looking at it like, oh, this is a lot of bolded words. And also, when you're moving your essay from a Google Doc to the Common application, it's going to get rid of all the italics you had. So make sure to manually put that in the Common App as well. And then the last thing is focus on tone. We've talked about this a little bit, but just make sure, does it sound like you when you're reading out loud? Does this sound like me? And adjust it if it sounds too formal, if you have too many of those, thesaurus words, if it's too casual, even too, you want it to sound like you, but make sure you're not like, sup, bro. Yesterday I went to the park and I hung out with my boys. Don't do that. Kind of find a good in between there. Um, and also make sure it doesn't sound inauthentic. If you're reading your first draft and you're like, it leaves you with a sour taste in your mouth, that probably means it's not resonating with you and it doesn't make you feel good about what you just wrote about yourself. So, that would be a great point to be like, okay, let's try a different draft and let me try, writing more in tune with who I am and in more of a genuine sense, even if that means maybe I should try a different topic.
Yeah, and one thing I just wanted to add, especially about the nitty-gritty editing or formatting issues, before you hit submit to a certain college on your application on the Common App, you're given an option to download your application as a PDF. And this is something that I did for every single school that I applied to before I submitted. I downloaded that PDF and I made sure everything was exactly right, that it looked the way that I wanted to, that nothing was copy and pasted incorrectly, that the formatting was okay. And I know it might seem, you've submitted it, like you've finished all your essays, you've pasted them onto the Common App, you might want to get it done and over with, but this is not the time to do that. No, you need to be meticulous about what you're submitting, make sure everything looks good. I personally, before I submitted, I would reread the whole application as if, like, thinking as if that I was an admissions officer, what I would think about it. I don't know if you guys can tell, but that's something that I do a lot and I highly recommend. But you just want to make sure that everything is the way that you want to submit it because you don't want it to be in a situation where you realize you accidentally pasted in the wrong essay under a different prompt or that submitted another school's essay supplemental to the wrong school. Like you don't want that to happen. It's completely avoidable just if you make sure and you're being careful and checking. Um, okay, so final essay writing tips. Start early and give yourself plenty of time. I know some English teachers at the end of your junior year will allow you to start working on your personal statements in class. If that's the case, please take advantage of that. If that's not your case, you don't need that to happen. You can start working on it on your own. Whether it's looking at examples, reading the prompts, brainstorming ideas, doing a free write, just opening a blank Google Doc and just writing out thoughts. Um, Even if they go nowhere, it might get your brain thinking about something that might end up being your topic for your personal statement. So you want to start early and give yourself enough time because this is an important essay and you don't want it to be the day before your early applications are due and you haven't finished the personal statement. That's a situation that is very stressful. It's going to make not only you, but the people around you stressed, and it's completely avoidable. Starting now, you can start thinking about that even tonight or in the next coming days or weeks. Write multiple drafts and revise as needed. So, like I mentioned earlier, you might have a couple of different topics that you might want to explore for your personal statement, nothing is stopping you from writing an entire draft for each different topic and exploring those and revising each of those. It might give you an idea for a supplemental essay later on, or it just might make you a better writer and ultimately create the best essay for you. Don't let having multiple ideas stop you from starting your essay. Um, and not only having different drafts of different topics, but once you have your topic that you want to write about, don't write it once and be done with it, never look at it, and then just submit it. You want to reread it, maybe give yourself a couple days, like Cece said, give yourself some space, come back to it with a fresh mind, fresh eyes, and reread it. I know it's happened to me many, many times where I've written something and I go back to it maybe weeks, months later, and I realize that was not strong writing. Or I'll think, how could I have written that? This is not good. You want to allow yourself the time and the space to come to that revelation before you submit it to your colleges that you're applying to. So drafts starting early and staying organized and keeping track of all your deadlines. All those spreadsheets we were talking about yesterday, this is what they are for. Staying organized and making sure, you're writing, this is more specifically for the supplemental essays, which we'll talk about tomorrow, but that you've got all the supplemental essays, the right number, that you have the deadlines all organized. And specifically for the personal statement, most, if not all of the schools that you're submitting to are going to need the personal statement because they're going to be on the Common App. Like we mentioned earlier, some schools like Georgetown aren't on the Common Application. They have their own portal, but still, they have a prompt that is the same as the personal statement. So I know a lot of people who just submit, and this is what I did as well when I applied to Georgetown. I submitted my personal statement as a supplemental for Georgetown because it was the same exact prompt. So this is an essay that's very important because it's going to all of the schools you're applying to. Seek feedback from a peer or a teacher, but you also want to be selective, like Cece said, about who you're sending your essay to. So you want to make sure you're getting feedback, but that you're getting feedback from the right people who are going to be supportive, who aren't going to make you uncomfortable, and who aren't going to steal your writing, because I know that has happened in the past. So, be smart about who you share your essays with. Be confident in yourself and believe your story. Trust your gut. This is ultimately your essay. It's describing you. It's not being sent to universities under anybody else's name but your own. So you want to make sure that it's a story and topic that you're proud of, that it shows you in a good light. And if you ever are not feeling confident about it, give yourself some space, reground yourself, and reapproach your essay. If you're not feeling confident, that might mean you might want to switch your topic, or it might just mean that, you're feeling a little stressed and scared because this is a stressful and scary time, but don't let that take away from your experience and showing how great of an applicant that you can be. And my last point, find examples online, especially early on. This is writing that we don't really do in school. So it's something that's new for a lot of people. So I tell kids to read examples online, and the New York Times, they have great examples of really strong essays that they publish every year. So I think that's a great place to start to look at examples. And there's real essays written by real kids, and it tells you what college they end up going to. So I would say if you don't know where to start, that's one place where you can look for inspiration. But obviously, you don't want to copy any of the essays, especially not word for word or the specific topics that they have. But it might give you an idea of what a personal statement is supposed to look like. So that's one place to start. Okay, thank you guys so much for listening to the presentation. I know that yesterday we didn't have time for questions, so we wanted to make up for it today. So we'll be answering questions if people can send them in the chat.
Yeah, everyone send your questions in the chat. We'll answer questions regarding this slideshow first, and then we'll go back to some questions that weren't answered yesterday. I already have a few questions here, so send us your questions in the chat now, but before we get to those, I'll start off with a few I already have. So someone asked, um, what POV should we use to write the essays? Can we use the word I, the word you, the word we? Thank you. I think that's a great question. Um, what I would say to that is it's your essay, do whatever you want. This essay is not, your typical essay that you guys are used to writing in school for class. This is very different. This is more than an essay, it's a piece of writing and it can be artistic if you want it to be. Um, it can be argumentative if you want it to be. It can just be a piece of writing that is kind of like a journal entry or a diary entry. It really is totally up to you. And depending on what your topic is what I would say, kind of base that off of what perspective, point of view you want to use. For me, I used I because, it was about my emotions, like something I'd gone through and like what I learned from it. So I used that. But I do know that one of my friends did like a business pitch on why I forgot what it was, why like donuts or something were the best food because she wanted to apply for a business and she used the words you a lot. Like, I know you would love a donut right now, like kind of like talking to the reader in that sense. So it really depends on what you're writing, and there's no right or wrong answer.
But I will add to that, because it is a personal statement, I will say I think the vast majority, not that I think, I know the vast majorities of personal statements um, submitted to colleges are in the first person. So they use I and we, because it is a story about you. I think it would be very hard to, unless you have a very cool concept for your personal statement, like doing a business pitch, um, or I've heard of somebody who wrote their personal statement as if it were a missing persons investigation about themselves. So I think those are very specific, um, ideas, concepts for the personal statement that would allow you to not use the first person. But barring those cases, I think the vast majority are first person. So, and I know that's hard. I know a lot of students struggle with it because, in school we're told don't use I or we in your essays. It's something that's not professional, but this is not the case for college admissions essay writing. You want it to be in the first person in the vast majority of cases.
The next question here is I wanted to know if I understand this right, but basically, every single school I apply to needs my personal statement and another essay specific to the school. Milena, do you want to answer that one?
So most schools you'll be applying to, if not all, will receive your Common App personal statement, which this is like the big essay that we've been talking about the most in this presentation. Some schools, a lot of schools, will require you to submit supplemental essays. And this might be one additional essay, or some schools ask for up to nine. Um, that can sound daunting now, but the good news is a lot of the time the supplemental essays will be significantly shorter. I think most of them range from around 2 to 300 words, with some supplementals being extremely short. So, for example, I know Brown, they are one of the schools that have 9 supplemental essays, but one of them is describe yourself in 3 words. So I wouldn't really call that one an essay, but it is one of the supplements. Um, so yeah, so that is the distinction, and we're going to be going over all the supplemental essays and everything you need to know about that in tomorrow's webinar. So check that out. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely gonna you're gonna learn more about the difference between supplementals and your personal statement tomorrow. But I think the big thing is your personal statement can really be whatever you make of it, and your supplementals kind of have to be um based on a question and based on like the vibe of the school that you're responding to. So it's a little different in that sense. And also, I just want to, emphasize the point that not all schools are going to require supplemental essays, and a lot of them don't.
Okay, sorry, just sifting through questions. Um, I got a question about how did you deal with all of the problems and challenges you had in the way because of, college admissions being a stressful time. And I will say, um, I wouldn't say that I avoided them. College applications, they are stressful. I don't think there's any way to make them not stressful, but there are things you can do to make them less stressful. So I think the most important thing is giving yourself time, starting early. I think a lot of the stress stems from students who have maybe procrastinated and the deadlines are coming up and they aren't feeling confident about their applications. Um, but great news for you guys, that is a situation that can be avoided. If we start early, if you um, plan your time, if you schedule yourself and, are disciplined and sit down and you say, okay, I'm gonna write half a draft today. And even if it's horrible, even if I don't like it, at least I've started. And that's one step ahead than you were before. And it's important that, you give yourself time because it is going to be stressful. And leaving everything for last minute is going to make the process so much worse. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I also just think that have this is annoying and you probably don't want to hear this, but have fun when you can writing these things. I found writing my personal statement was incredibly relieving for me because I finally got to write about something that's very personal to me and something that I haven't written about in the past. So it was actually fun for me to be able to, get into it and like be able to work on a piece of writing for a long period of time and feel really proud of it at the end. Um, Another thing about not getting stressed though is don't write 40 drafts of your personal statement. Don't do it. I have one friend who literally wrote like 30 drafts of his personal statement, and it just, after like the 10th draft, it just got worse every time. You know what I mean? Because at a certain point, you kind of just have to leave it where it is. Um, so my big advice is once you've done a few drafts, once you've gotten feedback from 1 to 3 people, leave it where it is, at least for a week, and see how it sits with you. If you really aren't feeling good about it, go back to the drawing board, but don't keep picking at it. At a certain point, it is what it is, and it's time to work on your supplementals. So that's a great way to not feel stressed as well. Don't procrastinate your supplementals because you're working on your personal statement. Your personal statement is very important, but your supplementals are arguably more important for some particular schools. So make sure you're spending enough time on those as well. And that's a good mindset to be in. Be like, okay, I have the summer to work on my personal statement, and now I'm done with that starting in school, and I'm not going to touch that again.
And something I just want to add, Cece, a great point about making it fun when you can. Um, I know, like, I was stressed when I was applying to college, but I still, found myself enjoying. I personally liked writing the supplemental essays, and in this past year, when, I've started college, I found myself, almost missing writing supplemental essays, which I know might sound a little weird, but I was never somebody who would take time to, write creatively. And that's something that I was able to find throughout the college admissions process. And um, so it might seem scary and stressful, but, take a breath and realize, you're being given an opportunity. maybe for the first time in your life to truly reflect on, what you've accomplished, what you're proud of. Um, and you might learn things about yourself that you didn't realize. And I think it's a pretty incredible opportunity. So I know it might sound crazy, um, but try to take advantage of that.
Yeah, 100% I agree. Okay, another question here is how many hours did you spend on the writing of the personal and supplementals for all the apps? I have no idea. A lot, I can tell you that. A lot of hours. For my personal statement, probably more than I should have. But I really can't give you an estimate of number of hours, but I think I worked on my personal statement all summer. And that doesn't mean I was working on it every single day. That means I did my first draft, let it be for a week, didn't touch it for a week. Then I came back to it, edited it a little bit one day. A few days later, did a little bit more editing. A few days later, let my mom read it. Well, no, I think I let my mom read it like a month later, but so it took me a good amount of time to, kind of see like what resonated with me. So overall, the span of me writing my essay took, I think, like 2 months, but I was not writing every day. It was kind of just that time was for me to really, 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 see what I wanted, see how I wanted to write it and stuff like that. And for supplementals, oh, that took so much time. There was a period during senior year fall where I was just writing supplementals every night of every weeknight, and all day on the weekends. And I'm sure Milena also spent a lot of time because she applied to more schools than me. So
Yeah, so I don't think I can give you an estimate on the time, because um, it was a lot of time, definitely. But I can tell you, I applied to 28 different schools, and I ended up writing 70 essays, including all of the supplements. Um, but take that with a grain of salt because that does include the Brown essay that was only 3 words. But still, that was something I had to, 3 words might actually be harder. I love the shorter supplementals, but it's really easy to hyperfixate and think about every specific word, and you might actually spend more time on the shorter ones. Um, but so yeah, you want to give yourself plenty of time. Start as soon as possible. Summer for the personal statement. If you can start um, your supplementals over the summer, that's great. I will say a lot of the prompts, first of all, most schools don't change the prompts from year to year. Some schools occasionally do. Um, this is for the supplemental essays that I'm talking about, prompts for the supplemental essays. But the new prompts, if they are changed, go live on on the common application, typically around August 1st. So, um, you can check out the prompts for the supplemental essays for each school, what they were for this application cycle, and maybe start brainstorming. What would you write if this was the same prompt? You maybe not want to start writing those essays in case they are changed, but maybe it's just a good idea to, give you some potential topics that you might want to write about. But on August 1st is when they go live and they change. So that's when you can theoretically start writing your supplementals. Somebody asked me, can you include artwork in your personal statement? I think if you mean like a physical like piece of art, I know some schools allow you to upload an art portfolio, I think they call it, um, that you want to be considered in addition to the components that you have submitted throughout the application. But I don't think you can include like an image in a personal statement. Um, but that's not stopping you from describing it if you want to talk about a painting that's important to you or something along those lines.
yeah, I definitely want to answer this question as well. Also, that like artwork question, I feel like most colleges won't lets you, because of the way that Common App is, like you can't, like where the Common App essay you have to put it, it doesn't allow for like, you to put a PDF there or like put an attached image. But some schools actually have a section where you can add like an additional like art portfolio or something like that. So you could do that. Um, this next question, which I think is a really good question, says, when students feel the pressure to impress college admissions officers, how does that affect the way they tell their own stories? Is it possible for us to stay authentic and write something that stands out to admissions officers while viewing the perspectives of not keeping the essay too random or meticulously planned? I think that is, a dense and like, hard question. I will say on a personal level, when I was writing my essay, I felt guilty at first because I was writing about a family, not a family like issue, but a family thing that was very personal and involved other people, and not just myself. So I felt morally confused about it at first because I was like, should I be allowed to do this? It's not just my story, it's other people's story as well. Um, and what I will say to that is I found that having to write my college essay was the perfect excuse for me to really like explore this, topic in depth with myself and see how I felt about it. So there's no, harm in writing a draft and being like, yeah, that's too personal. I don't want to submit that to other people to read. There's no harm in doing that. And sometimes you'll come out of it and be like, wow, I really think me writing that has helped me process it personally. And I think it would be a great thing to share with, the place that I want to go to next, the university I want to go to next. So, the way that I would say to be, the most genuine you can be is just start writing and see how it feels afterwards. Don't worry about it before you write it. Just write it and see how it feels, post the first draft. And it's okay if it doesn't feel good, but it's also okay to be like, hey, I want to get into college. And even though this is, a very personal experience, or this is, something I helped someone with, but I feel kind of guilty taking the credit for it, it's okay. And sometimes it's more about showcasing how you responded to an experience and how you're personally different, and even like how your writing style is different, and showcasing something unique about yourself. And, it's okay. And don't feel guilty about writing something very personal, something deep, something dramatic. A lot of people do it.
We're almost at time, so I just want to kind of just close things up by I just want to remind everyone that a year ago, Milena and Celia were at webinars and workshops and reading books and on blogs and on Reddit and on YouTube and who knows what. So this was literally a year ago that they were researching and learning the ropes. And Milena was at the Queller webinar since ninth grade. So I'm just sharing with you that this is a learning curve for everyone. So, where you are today, you'll be a leader tomorrow. So, remember that. And it's so important. I really want to stress that it's important that you always show in your personal statement how you are growing, how you're getting better, stronger, wiser. So important that you focus on your fiber and what makes you strong. I cannot stress how important that is to show in your essay. What have you learned? How have you been strong? I also wrote about family and I wrote about hardships, but I really made it a point to focus on how I overcame an obstacle, how I persevered despite hardship. It's so important to show that in your essay. This is your chance. And it is really a fun experience as well because you get to like talk about yourself, like what makes you tick, what makes you work, what makes you it's like you kind of miss it later. And I do want to share at Queller Prep, like it's a really special time. So this experience is a special time. So please remember to take it for that. I want to take a moment just because we're at time, so we can do any more questions next time. But I want to take a moment, if you could help me, Milena, to open the chat so that we can chat, all of us. So let's open the chat. I want to say thank you.
Yeah, the chat is open now.
Yay. So am I typing to everyone? Wait, did I
Yeah.
do that or did I type to one person? Hold
So you,
on.
you type to
I
everybody.
did it to everyone. So I want to take a moment, everyone. Let's give a thank you. Milena, Cece, thank you so much. Thank you so much to the Parents Association. Thank you so much to the schools. I really want to give everyone this huge token of gratitude. Thank you so much for organizing this. This was so professionally done in short notice. So I really want to take a moment to say thank you. This was a really important learning curve that we're having. So we're really blessed. We're very fortunate right now. And something I love to do at the end of the webinars, I love doing this. I like to take everyone off mute. Let's give a huge thank you to our wonderful hosts and co-hosts. So I'm going to ask everyone to unmute, and then I'm going to count to 3, and we're going to say thank you to everyone. And we're going to count to 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Thank
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 you.
you.
Q.
you
Thank you.
so much. This was so good, so helpful. Thank you. Ready? Let's do 3 thank yous. 1, 2, 3.
Thank
Thank you, thank you,
Thank you.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much. That is it. We said, oh, look at that. The mom wrote, "You girls are amazing." Do you
you.
see that? Do you
Yeah.
see that? Thank you,
Thank
Milena,
you.
Cecilia. Thank you. I'm
Thank
so
you
happy.
guys.
Thank you, everyone. Wow, Cecilia, 18 years old. You believe it? Your second college webinar. Milena's like, I've been through this. I could do this on a Tuesday in my sleep, right? You're like, I'm done. I'm done. I did all these, right?
Oh, I love
I'm
hosting
really
these
happy.
webinars.
I'm really happy. Thank you so much. I know. Do you believe? Remember the very first one? All the nerves are gone, right? It's like, no problem, no biggie. We're done. We got this. We got this, right? I'm so happy. Thank you to everyone. And here's to another evening of great webinars. Thank you. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for
Have a
coming, guys.
really, thank you. Oh, look at that. They wrote, "You are both role models." You see that? Isn't that so nice? That is so sweet. Look at that.
Aw.
That is so nice. Look at that. Isn't that so cool? You see that, Cecilia? A midnight email. Look at that. Look at where you are a week later. You see that? You see that? It happens fast. I'm so proud of you. Good luck, everyone. Here's to another amazing webinar tomorrow. And then we're going to end with financial aid, FAFSA CSS. We'll close up the week. All right. Thank you again. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Ooh, from Philadelphia. Do you see that? Look at that, out of state. Impressive, right? Okay.
Go
Cool.
birds.
Wow, look at us. We have a out of tri-state area reach. Look at that. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Bye. Thank you. Good night, everybody. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye bye. All right, that's it. I'm